Okay, guys, and it's been a minute, so we're going to be returning to Understanding Scientology, which is a book written by Marjorie Wakefield. So stay tuned for the beginning of this chapter. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I know it's been a minute since I've covered the Understanding Scientology book, but I've had 1,001 things going on, and so today I'm going to start with chapter 2, and we're going to see how far we get into it. So chapter 2 is called L. Ron Hubbard, Messiah or Madman? In my opinion, straight up con artist, but that's aside. Again, Understanding Scientology is a book written by Marjorie Wakefield, and I will have that information in the description box down below at the end of this video. Anyway, let's get into the chapter and see how far we get. It is worthy of note that the most notorious quacks, often men of genius and education, though mentally ill-balanced and morally of low standards, have been great travelers and shrewd observers of human nature. When such an one becomes ambitious to accrue wealth, he is likely to prove a dangerous person in the community. That is a quote from Robert Means Lawrence in 1910. Ironically, most messiahs have been marked unstable lives. Their backgrounds and life histories are rife with traumatic experiences. It is commonplace among them that their calling is precipitated by crisis, nervous breakdown, and physical collapse. Most messiahs are people who have been unable to successfully integrate themselves into ordinary society. They are marginal individuals, members of groups denied access to power, or individuals who, for a variety of reasons, have failed to achieve it. As a group, messiahs also display other characteristics. They are ambitious, intelligent, and rigid. Thus, despite their inability to follow the usual routes to success, they manage to create their own. That's a quote from Willa Appeal in Cults in America. I think we can all say that's kind of true of L. Ron Hubbard. He really did not fit in anywhere. So he made his own religion. And a bunch of people have bought in and lost everything. To his followers, L. Ron Hubbard was larger than life. The biographies of Hubbard given within the cult portray the metamorphosis of this legendary man in stages from youthful prodigy to teenage adventurer to brave war hero to the long-suffering messiah who gave his life for all. It would seem only logical that a man of the extraordinary accomplishments boasted of by Hubbard would have had an equally extraordinary life. Unfortunately, while the legendary accomplishments of this cult guru might have made interesting fodder for one of his swashbuckling adventure novels, the true facts of his life reveal quite another picture. As with the Wizard of Oz, once the curtain was drawn, the fearsome wizard was just an ordinary man. So it was with Hubbard. The official biography states L. Ron Hubbard was born in Tilden, Nebraska on March 13, 1911. His father was Commander Harry Ross Hubbard of the United States Navy. His mother was Dora May Hubbard. So far, everything is true. Because his father was away at sea, the biography continues. Ron spent his early childhood years on his grandfather's large cattle ranch in Montana. Phone is doing things it's not supposed to. Said to cover a quarter of the state. It was on this ranch that he learned to read and write by the time he was 3.5 years old. The truth is that Hubbard's grandfather was a small-town veterinarian who did not own a cattle ranch in Montana. After Hubbard and his parents relocated to Helena, Montana, where his father was hired to manage the local theater, the grandparents soon followed, bought a house on Fifth Avenue, and the father opened the Capital City Coal Company. In another biography, Hubbard boasted that his great-grandfather, I.C. DeWolf, was a distinguished sea captain. It is not known whether the grandfather was a sea captain. However, it is known that I.C. were the initials of his great-grandmother, not his great-grandfather. So, already it is setting up, showing exactly how much of L. Ron Hubbard's life is a lie. That this religion totes to be the truth. Just in the first 3.5 years of his life. Boom. Huge lies. L. Ron Hubbard found the life of a young rancher very enjoyable. Long days were spent riding, breaking broncos, hunting coyote, and taking his first steps as an explorer. For it was in Montana that he had his first encounter with the Blackfoot Indians. He became a blood brother of the Blackfoot when he was 10 years old. He rejoined his family. Just reading that makes me side-eye it. Okay? You're probably looking at me going, how are you side-eyeing it? I know I'm pasty, I'm white, I don't look like I have any Indian blood in me, but on my father's side, there is quite a bit of Indian lineage. If you look at my father, he looks like he could just step into a headdress and he would be fine. I unfortunately took my complexion from my mother, who's got a bunch of like German and Irish in her, so hence red hair, very pale. Anyway, it already just does not ring true. But moving on. Although these events may have existed in the imagination of a young boy in Montana, that is the only place where they did, in fact, exist. Young Ron Hubbard lived with his parents in a small apartment on Rodney Street in Helena. And he attended the local kindergarten. His grandparents and his lively maternal aunts lived nearby. When he was 6 years old, his father enlisted in the Navy after the start of World War I. For the next few years, Ron and his mother followed Harry to a series of port cities where he was stationed. By the time he was 12 years old, young Ron Hubbard had read a large number of the world's greatest classics, and his interest in philosophy and religion was born. Ron Hubbard had the distinction of being the only boy in the country to secure an Eagle Scout badge at the age of 12 years old. In Washington, D.C., he had also become a close friend of President Coolidge's son, Calvin Jr., whose early death accelerated L. Ron Hubbard's interest in the mind and spirit of man. Although Hubbard did receive an Eagle Scout badge at the age of 13, the Boy Scouts of America keeps only an alphabetical listing of Eagle Scout with no record of their ages. Hubbard was chosen during his 13th year to go with 40 other scouts to shake the hand of President Coolidge, who was given an honor by scouts. It is not known whether he did become friends with the president's son. The following years, from 1925 to 1929, saw the young Mr. Hubbard between the ages of 14 and 18 as a budding and enthusiastic world traveler and adventurer. His father was sent to the Far East, having the financial support of his wealthy grandfather. We already know that's a lie. L. Ron Hubbard spent these years journeying through Asia. He was up and down China Coast several times in his teens, from Qinghuangtao to Hong Kong and inland to Peking and Manchuria. In China, he met an old magician whose ancestors had served in the court of Kublai Khan, and a Hindu who could hypnotize cats. In the high hills of Tibet, he lived with bandits who accepted him because of his honest interest in them and their way of life. In the remote reaches of the West Manchuria, he made friends with the ruling warlords by demonstrating his horsemanship. On an island in the South Pacific, the fearless boy calmed the natives by exploring a cave that was supposed to be haunted and showing them that the rumbling sound from within was nothing more sinister than an underground river. Deep in the jungles of Polynesia, he discovered an ancient burial ground steeped in the tradition of heroic warriors and kings. Right there, I'm saying all the way. Like, what early 20s movie did he watch? What movie did he steal it from? Because this is nobody's life. This sounds like the makings of freaking Indiana Jones or some shit. Heady adventures for a teenager. The truth, however, is a bit more believable. At the age of 13, the Hubbards had moved to Birmingham, Washington, where young Ron Hubbard was an 8th grader in Union High School. Hubbard enjoyed activities such as hiking and camping at the nearby Boy Scout campground. 2 years later, when Ron Hubbard was a sophomore at Queen Anne High School, his father was unexpectedly posted in Guam. It was decided that while his mother would join her husband in Guam for the 2-year posting, Ron would go to live with his grandparents and aunts in Helena and finish high school. However, to mollify Ron, the father suggested that he spend part of the summer with them in Guam before returning to school. So in May of 1927, Ron and his mother sailed to Guam on the steamship President Madison, with stops in Honolulu, Yokohama, Shanghai, Hong Kong, and Manila. Mother and son arrived in Guam in June, and Ron spent the month teaching English to native children who were apparently spellbound by his thatch of red hair. In July, the young Hubbard sailed back home and was registered by September as a junior at Helena High School, where he joined the editorial staff of the school newspaper as the jokes editor. And I can see why, because his entire biography is a gigantic fucking joke. In the spring of his junior year, however, Hubbard suddenly disappeared from both home and school. There was a rumor that he had a fight with a teacher and didn't want to face being expelled from the school. He went first to visit an aunt and uncle in nearby Seattle, then caught a train to San Diego and caught a ship bound to Guam. Although he couldn't sail without permission from his father obligingly cabled the needed permission. Young Ron was bound once more for Guam. In Guam, his mother tutored him to prepare him for college. In October of 1928, Ron went with his parents for a 10-day vacation in China, where Ron was unimpressed by the Chinese. Writing in his journal, "They smell of all the baths they didn't take. The trouble with China is there are too many chinks here." Very, very racist. Racist. In his journals, young Ron was already writing adventure stories, interspersing his more mundane studies in history and geometry with adventure stories, most often in intoxicating Oriental settings. To his father's disappointment, Ron failed the entrance exam to Annapolis Naval Academy. Determined to get his son into the academy, Harry enrolled Ron in Waverly Academy. Harry enrolled enroll Ron into Waverly Preparatory School in Manassas, Virginia, in the special programs for prospective Annapolis candidates. Inevitably, however, Ron was denied admission to the academy because of bad eyesight. Next, Ron was enrolled in the Woodward School for Boys in Washington, D.C. as a substitute for taking college entrance exams in September of 1930. Ron was admitted in George Washington University School of Engineering with a major in civil engineering. So, his whole, fantastical war career was already put on hold because he couldn't get into Annapolis because he had bad eyesight. If ever there was a match made not to be, it was between young Hubbard and the School of Engineering. Bored by studies in calculus, chemistry, and German, Ron immersed himself in starting a gliding club on the GWU campus. Ignoring his studies, he spent every possible minute at the nearby airfield and was soon licensed as a commercial glider pilot. Predictably, and to his parents' distress, Ron's grades for the first semester ranged from an A in physical education to a C in mechanical engineering to a D in chemistry and F's in German and calculus, earning him a D average and placing him on scholastic probation. Undaunted, Ron continued to write his stories, and in January of 1932 had his first professional article published in the flying magazine The Sportsman's Pilot. During the summer of 1932, Ron organized the Caribbean Motion Picture Expedition, renting a 4-masted schooner and planning a voyage with 50 other students to 16 Caribbean ports of call, at which they would make adventure movies. However, the trip did not turn out as planned. A storm at sea drove the sailing ship off course, and they ended up in Bermuda instead of Montego. After leaving Bermuda, the fresh water leaked out of the tanks. Morale on the ship was at an ebb, and when the ship did finally reach Montego, most of the disgruntled crew abandoned the ship for home. The ship's owners realized that their fee was at risk, ordered the ship back to Baltimore, and where the trip had begun. If words would work with me today. Although Ron was later to claim the trip was a great success, citing among its scientific accomplishments that rare specimens of flora and fauna were gathered for the University of Michigan, that underwater films were taken by the U.S. Hydrologic Office, and the photographs of the trip were purchased by the New York Times. Subsequent investigations have proven that none of these things were true. Ron returned to Washington, D.C. to receive his grades for the previous semester, which were a B in English, D's in calculus, electrical and magnetic physics, and F's in molecular and atomic physics. Words are not working with me. Realizing he was fighting a losing battle, he informed his parents that he would not be returning to college. His father's solution to his son's educational failure was to send him on a trip to Puerto Rico, where the Red Cross was looking for volunteers. Ron used the trip to search for gold in the Puerto Rican countryside, working briefly as a field representative for a company called West Indies Minerals. In spite of his failure at school, Hubbard later frequently boasted that he had been a student of the first course of atomic physics in the country, and that he had received an honorary PhD, which he renounced much later when it was discovered and made public, the bogus degree had been purchased from the diploma mill in California. Again, even more evidence that he is just a person that will lie, cheat, and steal his way to the top. The official biography of Hubbard continues. His first action on leaving college was to blow off steam by leading an expedition into Central America. In the next few years, he headed 3, all of them undertaken to study savage peoples and cultures to provide fodder for his articles and stories. Between 1933 and 1941, he visited many barbaric cultures and yet found time to write 7 million words and published facts and fiction. Although there is no evidence that Hubbard made any trips to Central America, there is evidence that when he arrived back to Washington, D.C. from Puerto Rico, he married Mary Louise Grubb, nicknamed Polly, and began his career as a struggling writer. In 1933, he sold 4 articles, receiving less than $100 for all, the rate of pay for pulp fiction writers at the time being a penny a word. In 1933, his first child was born, a son named L. Ron Jr., and to keep pace with the rising expense of a young family man, Hubbard began to produce fiction at a prolific rate, often writing a story a day. His writing habits were unique. He would frequently write all night long, retire at dawn, and sleeping until the early afternoon. Soon this labor began to pay off as more and more of his fictions were published, and Hubbard began to acquire a reputation among the adventure writers. In 1935, his output included 10 pulp novels, 3 novelettes, 12 short stories, and 3 nonfiction articles. The titles of his stories included The Phantom Patrol, Destiny's Drum, Man Killers of the Air, Hostage to Death, and Hell's Legionnaires. Which is true. The man wrote prolifically. Like, there's evidence everywhere of his science fiction writing, of his westerns that he wrote, of his adventure stories. He wrote like crazy. But these other fantastical tales in his biography is another matter altogether. And that matter is one of lies and deceit, and he just cannot help himself. So I'm going to end. Okay. That's what we're going to do. Stop. Go away. Stop. Okay. So I'm going to end this part. This is going to be part 1 of chapter 2 here. I'm going to shoot another part of chapter 2 at another time. But anyway, guys, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe and ring that bell so that you're uploaded of every single time I upload a video. In the comment section down below, let me know what you think of what we have read so far and of the lies that have been uncovered. In the description box down below, I will post a link to chapter 2 of this book so that you can read it on your own. Also, my Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and email are all going to be linked down there. If you want to talk to me or send me information that you want me to investigate, you can send it to me on any of those platforms. And that's going to do it for today, guys, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.